Hello, everyone, and greetings, and thanks for joining us for a very special episode of Talking Strange, paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek Network. I'm your host, Aaron Sagers, a journalist, author, researcher of all things weird, and currently I can be seen on the Travel Channel show and Discovery Plus show Paranormal Caught on Camera, now airing its 5th season Thursdays on those networks. Today, for the first time in more than 50 years, Congress held an open panel on UFOs, or UAP, if you prefer, phenomena. And this follows the June 2021 9-page preliminary assessment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which focused on 144 incidents that dated back to 2004. So today was no doubt historic, but what was the ultimate result? Was anything revealed, or were there a lot of non-answers and inconclusive information? Well, to discuss that, we have gathered a group of experts from the field, and I'm very fortunate and excited to bring them on. So we're going to go ahead and start introducing them, and bear with me as I bring each of them in. This first gentleman is a UAP researcher and freelance journalist. He's a board member and director of media relations for the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. He also served as the official spokesperson for the Mutual UFO Network for several years, and he writes about UFOs for Den of Geek, Mr. Alejandro Rojas. Hello, Alejandro.
Hello, my
Thank
friend.
you for joining us. Hello,
Wonderful
man.
to see you.
Good to see you. And this next gentleman is a journalist who has presented credible stories about UFOs and the paranormal since 1975. In 1978, he became the only person in history to produce a milestone UFO presentation for the United Nations. He was the chief Huffington Post writer of hundreds of stories crossing the fields of UFOs and science. In 2020, he co-produced and co-wrote The Phenomena, a thought-provoking, critically acclaimed UFO documentary from director James Fox, and he currently co-produces and hosts the weekly Edge of Reality radio program on the KGRA Digital Broadcast Network. Mr. Lee Speigel. Hello, Lee.
Hi, how you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing great, sir. Good to see you, as always.
Finally, it's nice to see you without bumping into each other at airports like we've done before.
I know, that is correct, and I'm just happy to have you here and adding your knowledge and expertise to this. And our next guest is the co-host of the Alt Pop Repeat podcast. She's also the co-host of Somewhere in the Sky. She's a partner and director of media and PR for the Debrief, and just an all-around active and vocal member of this community. Please welcome Chrissy Newton. Hello, Chrissy. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Coming in with some nice audio, too. I love it. This gentleman is a series regular on Ancient Aliens, a lead investigator and co-host of Mysteries Decoded on the CW network. He's also been featured on Beyond the Unknown. He's the author of Somewhere in the Skies, A Human Approach to the UFO Phenomena. He's also the creator and host of the Somewhere in the Skies podcast. Mr. Ryan Sprague. Hello.
Hey, Aaron. I'm super honored to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you. And last, certainly not least, he is a UFO expert, a former federal criminal investigator. He's been on a mission to uncover the truth behind the country's most shocking and infamous UFO sightings. He's host of the Discovery Plus show UFO Witness, which a new season of UFO Witness is right around the corner. Mr. Ben Hansen.
Good afternoon or morning, wherever you might be.
Thank you for each of us for joining us, each of you. Just real briefly, and we do have some comments already coming in. People are wanting to ask questions about today, this historic day. So real briefly down the line, I would like to hear just the very initial reaction / takeaway. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it the quote unquote nothing burger that some people anticipated? Chrissy, why don't you begin?
Yeah, I heard the nothing burger. I'll always say this. I'm just happy we're here where we are right now. right? Like we've gotten this far, so I will take, anything that they can give us at this point. I think it's great, but for sure, we're always going to want more, and I think that's why we're having this discussion, and we'll have way more as we go along, and hopefully, they'll be doing more hearings like this too. So I
Right.
think it's a good step forward, personally. Yeah.
Well, Lee Speigel, you've been doing this longer than all of us. So what was your thought?
Well, I'm in the group of the nothing burgers. I like mine medium rare. I like veggie burgers, so that's a different kind of food. I kind of liked how Representative Adam Schiff said that this hearing was critical hopefully to result in UAP transparency, and he mentioned how UAP reports have been around for decades, and that it's our responsibility to be transparent to the public. At least, finally, we seem to be at the point where the public can get a real sense that there are members of Congress who confirm the reality of UFOs after so many decades. It's decades of denial and shrugging the topic under the rug. I thought it was real good that there were several references to Project Blue Book. That really struck me because it's good to remind not only the current policymakers and the public that the Air Force closed Blue Book more than 50 years ago, claiming, as we all know, claiming that there was nothing of any scientific interest in the subject of UFOs. There was no evidence that these objects represented any kind of advanced technology, and that they posed no threat to our national security. And now, finally, we now know none of that is true, that what they told us at the end of Project Blue Book. So I think we have to keep a concerned eye on our leaders who think they can have it both ways because they can't.
Well, yeah, you're right. They literally closed the book, said there was nothing there, and here we are today. Alejandro, as someone that was a PR spokesperson for MUFON, what was your just initial takeaway from this?
On the MUFON topic, it was great to hear them say MUFON, but I think MUFON, the only reason they mention it is because that's all they know. I mean, it's the largest UFO research civilian organization. And when it came in useful later on, when they were asking, what about public sightings? You're only paying attention to military. And they're like, well, we're going to look to work with other organizations that are out there. So that statement is exciting. Hopefully it happens, but they claim they're going to be working with civilian organizations, which for other foreign governments is not unheard of. Chile, for example, which I think we may say is maybe the shining example of a government UFO program. They worked a lot with civilian UFO organizations, so that'll happen. So it's good to start on a positive note. And on a positive note, I don't think in any way this is a nothing burger at all. It's disappointing, no doubt, but not a nothing burger. It was good that they were talking about this in a serious manner. All parties, nobody made fun of it. I thought it was unfortunate and kind of a fail when they brought up the sci-fi convention thing, and I don't even know what they're trying to do, maybe humanize themselves a bit, but it didn't really come across. They just said, we're working on the stigma to make this serious. Oh, by the way, Moultrie likes to go to sci-fi conventions. Maybe he'll wear costumes. And it kind of watered down that argument they were just making. But otherwise, everything was very serious. On that note, I think it's going to be very serious in moving this forward and making the mainstream feel comfortable talking about this topic. Otherwise, it was a complete fail on every other level. I think we did get some interesting information that they've gone on the record, and I think we'll touch on these points as we go along. But, the whole gist of this and the opening remarks were about, hey, DOD, you're only giving us sightings. We want more. You're dragging your feet, very strong verbiage that we want you to do something. And it seemed like that's what these hearings were going to be about. But after kind of pushing them a little bit in the opening remarks, they didn't touch on that at all. It was more just kind of like sitting around and saying, hey, guys, what are you guys going to do over there in the AIMSOG, which is great. We have the pronunciation of the acronym now. But we're going to, here's what we're going to do in the AIMSOG. Cool. Sounds great. And that's about it. Of course, there were Gallagher, for example. There were some examples of where some people kind of put them to task slightly. but not the kind of back and forth we were expecting, I think.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit more about some of the potential contentious interactions. But and just for context, yeah, there was a moment where Ronald S. Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, he's an admitted science fiction fan and convention goer, and it was used as a bit of comedic fodder for the moment. And yes, I think it was intended to humanize him, and I think he handled it overall well, even though there was that sort of jokey moment. That said, Ben, I'm holding you for last for this because I have a sense I know where the direction you're gonna go. But Ryan, was this worthwhile, or was this a waste of streaming time for you?
Absolutely not a waste. I don't think anyone's saying that. I think they have to again look at the very contentious relationship that the government has had with this topic for so long. I mean, this is huge. It's historic. No matter what was said, what came out of it, it is a historical moment for this topic. And as you guys mentioned, we will talk about some of the specifics. Gallagher in specific for me personally was the highlight of this. But I think overall, just to hear this topic being taken seriously on the Congress floor, again, for the first time in decades, was huge. I got chills at the beginning when Carson was talking about this, and nobody was laughing. Nobody was smirking. The room was more full than I actually thought it would be. So, yeah, this was not a nothing burger for me. It's like opening that Christmas present. You want the newest PlayStation, but you got to settle right now for the first Nintendo is kind of how I look at it. And I think we're on our way. This is
great way to
open
put
the
it.
doors. Yeah.
And let's face it, is perhaps the only topic right now that seems to have bipartisan support. And
Exactly.
I mean, arguably, I will say there's a lot of things going on in this nation right now that deserve attention. I'm glad that this is receiving attention. But Ben Hansen, so having listened to your colleagues and also watching this live, and I know you were tweeting about it, what was your reaction? What was your initial takeaway of all this?
Well, I concur with everyone that first we need to recognize it's historic. It's been over 50 years. It took us a long time to get here. I was optimistically, I think realistically optimistic at the beginning of it. I'm not expecting much to come from it. Having had now an hour and a half, 2 hours since it aired, though, I'm starting to get a sour taste in my mouth. I'm starting to look at what wasn't said, and trying to avoid going down that road of second guessing that maybe the task force is intentionally doing things, whereas I think the real case as we get into it is more of incompetence, and that's disheartening. It's disheartening that they're tasked with something, and now we're seeing where they're really at with it, and the lack of knowledge they really have, and the lack of seriousness they're taking it. So hopefully what comes out of it is that this is the first of many hearings, that the Congress stays on them, and we saw some of that fire, that they don't give that up, and they come back with better questions and really push them to come up with better answers.
Yeah, there was a couple moments throughout this that I responded with, really? Based on the responses. And, I guess actually one big question that I wrote down, and I need someone to answer this for me, is if UFOs, if UAP are deemed national security threats because they are unknown, and understandably, I guess the military would not want to reveal sensitive intelligence information that might tip hands to potential adversaries, then does that not create a justification for continuing to not tell us more? Because essentially every UAP is going to be deemed an adversary. If that,
yeah,
potentially, yeah.
Ben, you
But I mean,
started.
comment
I want to
on
hear
this.
from
I wanna
anyone that
jump
wants to
in.
jump in
It's
on this.
like,
yeah, let
I-
me go for it.
go ahead.
All right,
I was
let's
just going to
Ben.
say, to add for perspective, from the beginning, Susan Go, the representative, has already told us what the UAP task force, that's what she was talking about, but I think still holds true for any of these other groups that grow from it, that what they do is classified, what they investigate is classified, the results of what they get is classified. They've already said that. And what they're doing is classified. And I think that's a big point in that what we're going to get from the military is very limited. If we do get something like they said they would share data on unknowns, that would be unprecedented and something that's really never happened before. And they would have to develop mechanisms for that. For instance, they called Nimitz a UAP event. Will give us the data. You just told us you're going to give us data on events that are true UAPs that are not national security concern. Perfect example, Nimitz, they've given us zero. The only thing we have on Nimitz is firsthand witnesses and a leaked report that was allegedly written, and I believe it was. I think we all think it was written by Stratton, but for the OSAP group. So yeah, I think from the get-go, we can't expect a lot going forward.
Yeah. Who else wants to weigh on that? Ben, you seemed excited about that question.
Well, I tweeted that exact same thing because both Bray and Moultrie. Okay, so throughout the whole thing, from the beginning, the middle, and the end, they, looking at my notes here, they both confirmed or affirmed their commitment to giving full transparency, is what they said, full transparency to sharing with the public if, and they had two caveats. Number one, like you said, is if it didn't reveal sensitive sources and methods, okay? And number two, if it didn't reveal intelligence about our adversaries that we didn't want out. So sources and methods, like Alejandro pointed out, like that is an arbitrary stamp they could put on anything. If you look at what happened with the redacted preliminary report that came out and the redacted classified version, which was 17 pages, that so much of it's taken out, but things such as the shape of the UFO, the shape of the craft, diagrams of what they look like. So you could always take that point of view that, like, okay, well, if it's adversarial, if it belongs to Russia or China, we can't tell you the patterns of shapes we're seeing because we don't know if it's theirs. So boom, that's gone, right? So by definition, until you prove otherwise, an ET threat is adversarial. So you just remove it from the table. And that, to me, was really frustrating. They're playing this wordsmithing thing. I get it. I've been on the other side of intelligence, and I understand what they're trying to do, but it's really an empty promise.
Yeah, I think the next comment too is then they are having conversations with adversarials, they're saying. So I think it is then, what are those conversations that they're going to be having moving forward? If they're talking to China, what is that? What does that look like? What is the intel that they're sharing? And we know, I wouldn't say adversaries. I did an interview with Lou Elizondo about 2 months ago about this and the conversation about China and the threat. And I think that they're, for sure, he said that, he's briefing other countries. We don't know if they're full adversaries. He wouldn't speak to that, but it is happening. So I just like to know what those conversations are. And if they are having it, then what are they deciding to show us and not when they have those conversations, and knowing that it's adversarial or not. And what are they telling us then?
I'm going to throw it to Lee, but I also do want to note that there was a moment where, speaking of adversaries, so I think the idea of treating any potential ET as an adversary, that was one part, but also they did shut down a question about speaking to or reports on activity in adversarial nations, perhaps understandably, but that was saved for the classified portion of the panel as well. Lee, you looked like you had something to add.
I was very interested in watching the back and forth between Moultrie and Bray, almost as if they had a prearranged signal between them. That seemed pretty obvious to me. And you've all mentioned about how Moultrie already admitted that he likes going to conventions. Okay, but then then he would say something like, we've been increasing our efforts to collect and analyze UAP reports. And then he said, and this struck me, he said, we're open to all hypotheses about UAPs. Really? And that made me think, okay, if we take that sentence at face value, one of the all hypotheses is extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, other realities. So if you're saying we're open to all hypotheses, I read between the sentences or the words there in which he's actually saying, we're not actually coming out to say this, but extraterrestrial is one of the things we're considering. And then he said, to follow that up, he said, I enjoy the challenge of what may be out there. And I went, really? Now, when you say out there, are you referring to outside of our country or outside of our world? What exactly are you meaning, the challenge of what may be out there? So that struck me. And then when he gave the signal to Bray, and Bray picked up and said that he described that there are current protocols for military UAP witnesses to report encounters. And he said, again, it's how they say something. He said, we're not aware of any current technology that can operate with no visible means of propulsion. Wow. Okay. Why did you say that? Because if you're admitting that none of these real credible UAP, UFO reports, if they're real and they're not operating with visible means of propulsion and there's no current technology that can match it, then what are you saying?
He was saying they're UAP. I mean, he was supporting that there are UAPs out there.
Yeah,
he was confirming that.
Right, but they will generally, the policymakers I've seen will go just so far before saying, okay, we're being visited by someone from somewhere, and we don't know.
But they would have to have evidence of that, though, and I don't think they're indicating there's any evidence of that. And I personally, I would agree, we don't have strong evidence of that.
Yeah, or maybe we do, and that makes me think of the day that James Fox and I, when we did our interview with Harry Reid in his office in Las Vegas for the phenomenon. And James said to him, so do you believe, Senator, that we have evidence of what we're talking about here? And Reid got very, very excited when he said, yes, we've got it. We've got it all. And it's a shame to the American public that we're not being more responsive or transparent. But we've got everything out there that is considered evidence, but it's being kept from the people. So would he be lying about something like that? If a guy like him says, we've had evidence, I've seen evidence, but we're not supposed to show it to you. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
See,
that's my problem.
I don't know. I was just going to say, the evidence, the group of people that we're talking about that Harry Reid's working with is the Bigelow group. And they're used to saying very bombastic things without supporting any of it. And I think that's part of the problem. Reid can say that, but is that his personal opinion, or is that evidence that he's seen, that would prove this? And he hasn't clarified, nor have any of those people, nor has Elizondo or any of them. So, and some of the evidence, and I think maybe some of you would agree that they think is strong evidence, I personally feel is not strong evidence. The materials, they said we don't have anomalous materials. Elizondo has said they had anomalous materials. The materials I'm aware of them having, I do not agree are anomalous, that's been proven they're anomalous. I think that's kind of where we're getting is, and that's the problem. Can you prove it or do you believe it? And we're getting a lot of just stuff thrown out there without clarification or backing it up.
I want to address something to Ryan, just because I haven't heard from you in a minute. Somewhere in the Skies, your book took very kind of a personalized approach to encounters, and you really kind of did a journalistic style, which I appreciate. So I kind of thought about you when they were speaking about attempts to establish communication and said no. I'm kind of give me your reaction to that when they're seeing these objects and they're saying on one hand there was no communication received, and on the other hand there was no attempt to communicate. What do you think about that?
I don't believe that personally. I mean, I think one of the most telling things in James Fox and in Lee's documentary was Parviz Jafari from the Iranian Air Force saying his biggest regret was not trying to communicate
Right.
with the UAP he was chasing. So I do not personally believe that they have not attempted to communicate with some of these UAP if they do believe they are being piloted by something. But that's tough because again, we're getting into the classified nature of a lot of this. Where is the location that the UAP event happened? We can't tell you that. It could, hinder our intelligence. Or what was the shape? We can't tell you that. A lot of what we saw today was we'll talk about that in closed briefings, which was very frustrating for a lot of us. We want to hear the good stuff, of course. But I'm on this weird kind of tightrope, I think, with a lot of people out there of wanting to believe certain things and accepting the facts that were being given. And for me today, the facts are that this group has absolutely no idea what we're dealing with. Maybe in a few of these instances, I think the most telling thing today was Carson saying, are you showing us these videos that you can explain because you can explain those? What about all the unexplained ones? Will you be, admitting that or releasing that to the public at some point? And again, they said, we can't really discuss that. So I do think they were cherry picking today the things they could explain, like this pyramid UFO video, certain things like that. That was interesting. They were able to, on camera in front of Congress, debunk some of these things that we've been talking about for the past year and a half. That's been all over the news, flying pyramids and these other craft that were being photographed. And now they're saying we could explain that. So that gives me hope that, yeah, they can explain some of it, but it's clear that these two people, Scott Bray and Ronald as well, that they knew a lot less than the Congress members did. And that was extremely concerning to me that they had no idea that nuclear installations were being intruded upon by UAP. I mean, that blew my mind that they said we have no knowledge. We haven't looked into that. Right. Exactly, Ben. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, why are you not using the pre-existing data moving forward? I get you're investigating things from 2004 on, apparently, but why are you not referencing the 70 plus years of data in history that this topic has? That was most frustrating for me.
There was an element of sloppiness. I was watching it, and I mean, I am not part of the DoD or anything, but there were certain responses where I'm like, are you feigning ignorance, or is this just a matter of, well, we haven't talked to those people over there. That's their bubble, their operation, and they just haven't told us about they're dealing with Malmstrom or whatever. That's their deal. Anyone want to react to that? Ben?
Yeah. So my take on this is, like I said, I was hoping that I would hear from two highly informed, competent people, and not to repudiate everything they said here. I see more of a sense of like, you get an assignment, you're in the government, you get assigned a certain job, and you kind of get into the rote, procedure of like, okay, well, I don't know anything about this. This is what we're mandated to do. We got a timeline here. Just throw something together, get some staff together. So they pull people from other parts who have no qualifications in this, and they're clerical. They start looking into things. I tweeted that they really need a UFO 101 course.
Yeah.
I mean, to really get into this, you got to dive in. You have to have a passion for it. And I got the sense that none of them really had a passion. Going to a sci-fi conference is not a passion, okay, in this. So I got the sense that they're only doing what's absolutely necessary, which we learned that their instigation for them following cases was, we heard them say, well, the media hadn't brought that to our attention, something to that effect. Like, it hadn't come through the media. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what? The New York Times has to do a story on it for you to move on it?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I get the sense that... Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say the second part of it was if it's not from the media, then it's Congress or some external force like, Gallagher saying, well, I don't really have the order to tell you to do this, but I'd suggest you look into this Malmstrom thing.
Yeah, I also had a conversation too with Lou Elizondo about that. And he told me when I did my interview with him that ATIP knew about Maelstrom, like he knew about Maelstrom.
Of course they did.
So, right, exactly. So why are you, you have somebody else that used to work at the DOD and was working, with identifying UFOs and working behind the scenes saying that, yes, they knew. And then you come forward and say that you don't. Then the question is, well, who's lying?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like they're listening to Elizondo. It seems like they're really trying to erase the whole ATIP history also and just move from the the UAP task force, which is why Bray was there, because that was the Naval Intelligence Project, which then moved over to USD, which is now Moultrie's arena. They're just ignoring all of that. And a lot of people are calling for hearings, which is kind of scary when it comes to Elizondo, because he's this lone guy who's got to prove that all of this stuff happened or what they knew this or that. But I think historically, I think the message was good that we're taking this seriously. But I think it was Ben that mentioned, but their actions show they weren't. And of course, their knowledge shows they weren't. I don't think they were. I think they really thought this would all go away, that the public attention would go away, and it didn't. And if you look at the messaging before the hearings were called and before Brian Bender's article where he highlighted how these lawmakers are really concerned, they were talking about, we're going to keep collating. We're talking about hopefully getting our agencies to cooperate. They were really still not on point. But then once Brian's article came out, I think it was the next day the hearings were called, they changed their tune to now say we're trying to investigate. I think at that point they were scrambling. They're like, they're taking this serious. We better look like we're taking it serious as well. And so their education was kind of like to the point you guys were making. They have staffers who went and read books and read stuff. They have a meeting. Moultrie's like, okay, give me what's going on. He takes some notes, when it comes to nukes, scribble, scribble, scribble. He just heard what he wanted to hear so he could get through this briefing. And hopefully they'll begin to educate themselves, because the nuke thing is ridiculous. They say that the reason they're looking into this is for safety and security, the number one issue. And this isn't an issue that comes from UFO goofballs like they may consider all of us. This is a military issue where we've got documents going back for decades and decades showing officially they have these incursions over nuclear facilities. And they want to tell us they don't know or act like it's no big deal. This is the biggest issue. I know that we got our questions for the SCU in front of a lot of staffers. I don't know that if they got it any further, but we definitely made a big point that this is essentially the number one issue and nobody's addressed it.
Alejandro, just to put one moment, Lee, one moment. Okay. Alejandro, just to put this into context for those that may not have been following the panel live, talk a little bit about just very briefly what you're referring to with the nuke issue that they were saying they did not know about.
Yeah, they said they didn't know that there have been multiple occasions. I think there's something like 6 or 7 at least government documents that show major incursions by unknowns. And these documents are ones that are flagged. That's how we know, because they're FOIA-able because of the way they're flagged, that we've been able to get those via FOIA for years now. And they are very clear that we don't know what these are. And these incidents are pretty extraordinary. Beyond that, there's a lot of researchers, most notably Robert Hastings, who wrote a book called UFO Nukes, where he's talked to over 150 of these military witnesses. And he's got a documentary out where he's talked to very many of them, all extremely credible people. Robert Salas even had a press conference just a few years ago at the Washington Press Club, where he brought a lot of very credible witnesses. I actually met one in McMinnville who retired as a general. He was a colonel when he had the event occurred. He was, I believe, at Minot Air Force Base, because many Air Forces bases, even in Russia, this has happened, where these incursions have happened. But and he retired a general. So, I mean, these are very serious people. He also talked about, in some of these instances, some of the witnesses were told to sign NDAs, which is another very important topic. One at the SCU we were also pushing is, are you going to allow these people who have had to sign NDAs to share information with the committee? But I think the committee's still miles away from even knowing these NDAs ever happened. They're just extremely undereducated.
And specific to this panel, they were also referencing that there were objects over these nuclear facilities where ICBMs were rendered inoperable.
Right. And that's
and
a
they
big
said,
point.
and they, I believe it was Moultrie that said, we've heard about that,
So
but
it's not the database.
yeah,
Right. Which could mean that, like, yeah, we're
Our
aware of it,
database
but
sucks.
it's not our purview. We're not going to get into it.
yeah,
Right.
that-
And so
it's over there.
Let me just briefly
Please.
give you an analogy here. So all of us have worked in TV, right? But what I kind of sense going on, and this is nothing against, anything I'm currently working on, but you know how it goes. Someone creates a UFO show, and the producers are like, okay, we got green lit for a show. And they start pulling in researchers. Now, researchers could have worked on a cupcake show. They could have worked on, a Duck Dynasty. Who knows? They bring them in. They're talented people. They know how to research, but they know zilch about UFOs, right? And so maybe some of them have worked on another show somewhere, okay? But they have to be brought up to speed. And I feel like this office has not been brought up to speed at all. I totally understand how he said it's a lack of resources. I get it. But what happens if we throw them more money? What are they really going to do with that? Right. And so that, I think, is a main problem. Unless there's a real desire and a passion, they're going to stay inside their own little box. And the people who are generating the reports, to give you an idea, I think it was Ryan mentioned the pyramid, the triangular thing. Not to toot my own horn here, but Bray was referencing my report
About the bokeh effect.
The bokeh effect. So Mick West, love him or hate him, had brought forth this idea that, that there was some refraction of light, and it was the aperture of this and that, the night vision camera. So I said, you know what? I'm open to it. I'll go try it. And I did. I took my night vision. I went out and I filmed a drone, and I filmed an aircraft, and lo and behold, it created the effect, which I think is what was causing the shape. But what they missed was that does not explain that there's still a threat of these dozens of drones that were following the USS Russell over several days, well over an hour, not commercial off-the-shelf drones. They didn't know where they came from. They didn't know where they went. And yet Bray's presenting it as, explained. Yes,
which is the purpose of this group.
Yeah. Yeah, he said we've explained that one, but and I think it's Gallagher tasked him, and he said, well, where did you actually film this with did you film it of a drone and actually using it to see if that could be replicated? And he paused. He's like, well, we are aware of other studies where that had been done. He's referencing my video. Okay, it's out there on Twitter. I videoed it, and I'm thinking, I did that for free. Hire someone. If you guys don't have the resources to do this, why not source it in the same way the FBI does when they can't solve a crime?
Well, I think they are. They're obviously hiring right now, and we're seeing that. But what I would say is that they obviously don't have a proper communications plan. And as a PR person, you see that they don't have a level of dissemination. They don't have crisis management. Susan Goff needs to have a better crisis communication, or they need to update their strategy. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing them fumble. We're seeing them have a hard time with PR. And how do we communicate this? And then we'll see who they end up hiring now, because that's what's happening, right? They are looking, but they really need to be able to find better people to be able to communicate. And saying that no comment and I don't know anymore and non-transparency used to work for them, it doesn't work anymore. And that's what we've been seeing for a very long time.
I want to throw to Lee, because on one hand, and Ben, I think that's a very salient point, that they're clearly looking at what other people are doing out there, and it seems reasonable to intimate that they have probably seen your video and your findings on this, and that's what they're referencing. And yet, no offense to you, they would probably also label you as one of those self-serving individuals that essentially they might think, well, we can't quite trust those other parties out there. And I found that to be interesting, because there was a sense, and perhaps I'm just cynical and paranoid, that it was a little bit of the government being like, trust us, we'll tell you what you need to know, and we'll tell you, as long as it doesn't like threaten, endanger national security, we'll tell you what you need to know, but watch out for some of those self-serving groups. Lee, my question to you is, having being a longtime journalist, as someone that's presented about this topic as well, what do you think the public's takeaway from this might be? Because I mean, the other side of this is there was that question which I flagged about, should there be a regulation or prosecutorial actions towards people that are out there reporting these things and misreporting. I don't know, Lee, give me your reaction about how the public might take this.
I think this goes back to excuse me, something that Ryan said before. Ryan, I felt your frustration every time someone said, well, we can't really get into that, we'll cover that in the closed session later. And if I should have counted how many times I heard somebody say that, because especially when Moultrie said, and I don't know what the question was that led him to this, but he said something like, we're also very interested in what's happening in underwater cases, but we'll discuss that in the closed session. And I'm thinking, and I figure I'm John Q. Public. What do you mean in the closed session? Discuss it right now. Tell us what underwater cases. You can't even mention USO. I mean, what is it that you're hiding? I think that the public might have been frustrated and came away from this. How much of the public decided to watch this morning? Came away thinking, no, they don't trust us to know any information. They think that they know all the answers, and they're going to talk about it in a closed session. And nowhere did anybody say, oh, and by the way, we will release some of the findings of the closed session. And that made me think of, that report from June of last year. What we got, the public got the unclassified version, but we also know that there was a classified version. Mm-hmm. Have we seen or heard anything about that? That's like a closed session like this was this morning. And so they keep playing this kind of game. And I think the public falls for it without even knowing that we're being shrugged under the carpet just as much as the topic itself.
I kind of wonder if the public is falling for it, because looking at the reactions on Twitter, and that's only one part of social media, I do think people were picking up on the questions that were not answered. And look, I don't think any one of us is saying that we need to reveal sensitive classified information about underwater sensors that help with national defense, but there seems like there's something that could be said about that.
I don't want to know what kind of radar or sonar you have in your submarines that can pick up something that's going at an incredible rate of speed that is faster than anything we've got. I don't want to know about the technical part of it. I just want to know, what are they picking up? That's all I want to know. And I think that's what the public wants to know. Just tell us what is being reported that you don't want to tell us about.
Yeah, well, all the best questions, their answers were either we don't know, it's not true, or we'll talk about that in closed session.
We'll talk about that later.
Only the best interesting one was USOs. They said they don't have crashed UFO, they don't have materials, they don't know about the nukes, they don't know about the Wilson document, which I think is silly anyways, but funny that it got in there. But still, and then finally USOs, it's like, great. Oh, we're going to talk about that in closed session. That gives us no confidence that they're willing to share when the only topic they know something about, they're taking into closed session. Mm-hmm. Again, I think this goes to Chrissy's point that their PR has to change. Mm-hmm. I mean, they could have at least made some statement that and then taken it to closed session.
I'm not surprised by them, though. I'm not surprised. We saw this with the assessment report. We've seen it with all of them. So I think that we've all, maybe is a nothing burger in that, but at least we're getting there. It's chipping away, year by year, month by month to finally get some actual coverage. And we'll see what civilian footage will start leaking again. And we'll see what they have to say now about that.
I think on that, on that point, Chrissy, that's a great point. And yeah, I honestly think disclosure is not the government opening the door, it's the public blowing the door wide open. But we are running out of time, so my question for each of you is, either you could take either approach on this, but what's next, or did you have any other final thoughts about this hearing today, this panel? And also, how can people find you and support your work? Chrissy, why don't I begin with you?
Yeah, I'm just curious to see where it's going to go next. I want to personally know what the conversation about foreign adversaries. I think it's a very important conversation. I know Ben Hansen, I've chatted about this being UFOs and foreign adversaries. So I think that it's something that we really need to look at. And yeah, so that's where I'd like to go see this next and have a larger conversation and what that's going to look like. And people can find me at my little handle down there, at Chrissy Newton on Twitter. And you can also check me out at thedebrief.org too.
Excellent. And thank you,
Thanks,
Chrissy,
Aaron.
for joining us. And Lee
Thank
Speigel,
you.
final thoughts,
Yeah,
and what's next? And
I noticed that Bray, getting back to him, he mentioned just very, very cautiously, he actually said a number of other countries have admitted objects in their skies that they can't explain. And I keep coming back to this on my radio show and just in doing interviews. I keep trying to remind people, this is not just an American issue.
Yes.
Everything that we saw this morning was all about what was going on with our national policy, with Project Blue Book, what's happening here. There was hardly any mention the fact that this is a global thing we're dealing with. Nobody seemed to want to get out of that comfort zone of, well, we can prove it's one thing or another because we're here in America, we're making the policies. No, this is not American only. People have got to understand that, because it kind of makes us look bad, I think, to the rest of the world, because if America is not admitting that all of us, the rest of Earth here, are having the same problems, something's operating in our skies everywhere, why is America not confirming that more and more? This has got to be a global issue. And also the one of the representatives asked Bray, in fact, have there ever been any collisions with UAPs? And his response was no, but there have been 11 near misses. And I'm thinking, wow. And he said, and a number of these were physical objects. Wow. Okay. Can we hear more about that? No, it's going to be behind closed doors. So it's like they have to find a new way of responding. And this is probably one of the reasons why there haven't been many other open hearings in the past 50 years, because they don't want the public to see this kind of interaction going on behind the scenes, because they can't. Just the fact that they wouldn't even acknowledge the nuclear situation at all the bases is a big part. It's like they're trying to squirm their way around something that we all know is fact, and they can't get away with this for much longer. So I have great hope that something will happen. I'd like to see something major happen in the whole topic, but I'm not sure that the kind of disclosure that most people want to see is going to happen anytime soon, which is not to say I'm pessimistic about it. I would like to live long enough to see something important happen. And if people want to get in touch with me, you can find me at lee.speigel@hotmail.com, and I'll be happy to hear from you.
All right, great.
Out your email. My goodness.
He's still rocking the Hotmail.
Well, that's the only one I'll allow at this point.
Right. I'm going to sign you up for every spam service and everything else. Fine.
And you have no idea what I'm going to do to you, Hansen.
Let the accusations of being a reptilian begin for Lee Speigel by email. Alejandro Rojas, where can people support you? But also your final thoughts and takeaway on this open panel.
Yeah, 2 quick points, really. Disclosure, we might have heard quite a bit of disclosure. They don't know anything. Now, but do they? It comes back to, what we thought this was going to be, that they were going to be pressured into telling us about their failures thus far of being able to move forward. To Lee's point, is this disclosure? Maybe, but we didn't talk about one of the big topics is, are the other agencies cooperating? Because they've alluded to that they're not. We didn't even go there to those type of problems. The only time they raised one of these red flags that was supposed to be challenged was, we don't have the resources. That's not an excuse. No one jumped in there to say, what resources do you need? This isn't an excuse for moving forward. That was one of the conversations we were supposed to see. So moving forward, it depends. We've heard that there's going to be more hearings. I don't see the energy or the questions here that would call for more hearings. I hope that happens, but it doesn't look like it. If there are hearings, there's a big disconnect between OSAP and ATIP and what they've been saying and what we heard today. So two of the main people you'd want to hear from are Elizondo and Eric Davis. And I don't know how Eric Davis can stay in the closet when the Wilson document's now on record. That he's going to be a very important person if people start looking at that. And then finally, going forward, I think the one thing that we did see is they were very undereducated. They talked about wanting to work with MUFON and other civilian groups. So that's where groups like the one I work for, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, need to get in there and start saying, hey, we can educate you. Here's information. Here's information. We're serious. We want to help to educate them. Where can you get my information? explorescu.org would be the best link. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on there. And then you can see my little Twitter tag there, Alejandro T. Rojas.
All right. Thank you, Alejandro. And Ryan Sprague.
Yeah. Just 2 quick points. While I may not agree with certain representatives on aspects of a lot of other political issues, I do think the bipartisanship of this hearing was pretty hopeful that we can come together and have conversations about these things. And, people like Rubio have said, trust me, there's probably going to be some leaks when it came to that report coming out in the past. And now these, closed door sessions. I wouldn't be surprised, like Chrissy said, if some Congress member or a member of their staff reaches out to the debrief or to any of us and says, hey, that did not go as planned, kind of made us all look bad. Here you go. Again, I think Elizondo says it best. He doesn't condone leaks, but, it is a natural part of our political system, our government. When people feel that they're not being transparent enough with the public, they will try to nudge that transparency in some way. So I'm hopeful that maybe this will fuel the fire under some more Congress members to be like, whoa, this is an issue we should look at. Again, I had no idea who Gallagher was before today. And now I'm like, that dude actually put some passion behind this and was like, yo, look into this. You're apparently the preeminent people looking at this. Look into it. So again, I think all of this that has happened since the New York Times article up until today has been forcing the hand of government. They're not going to give any of this to us willingly. And I think it's awesome. There's grassroots efforts like, the Big Phone Home or the SCU signing, their names to this and saying, hire us. We're ready. We want to work with you on this. So I have hope that, hopefully the future will be bright in the next year or so. Maybe we'll see more hearings. Maybe the SCU or UAPX or groups like this will become a bigger part of the conversation and actually add to the data that our government supposedly is collecting. So, I have hope we'll see something. And in the meantime, you can check Chrissy and I out on somewhereintheskies.com. We do the podcast every week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel too. And we love having conversations like this, Aaron. So thank you. Thank you for your allowing us to do this today.
Most certainly, Ryan. And I will say just another point about the leaks is whether it's a nation or a congressperson with aspirations, when those leaks come out, if someone were to go on record, they would take a major hit. However, they would also become a rock star. And for sort of the celebrity status politician at this point, I think someone out there might be willing to do the calculus on that and go with it. Just an interesting, something that I was thinking of. Ben Hansen, where can people, final thoughts? What's next? And how can people follow you, Ben?
Twitter is at Ben Hansen 00. I'm on Facebook. New season of UFO Witness coming up sometime. We don't know
Sometime
yet.
soon.
Been filmed. It's in the can. So sometime soon on Discovery Plus. So much is going through my head, but I agree with nearly everything everyone has said. I did sense a lot of hubris here with the witnesses that spoke, but the more I get into this, the dejected feeling that I'm experiencing is incompetency, and really seeing that I don't know that the passion or the real interest. We're starting with this belief that they want to know, that they really want to solve this mystery, and I think that's a big assumption. I almost am to the point where I'm thinking this is so fragmented that no matter how much resource we put towards it, this department in the Navy is never going to know what these people in the Air Force know, or we can't get them to work together. Or if there's a secret keeping group, these secrets are so well hidden, they could actually be telling the truth. We need to consider that the front office people, these people who are the spokespeople, the people they call to be witnesses, could actually be telling the truth, that they know nothing, right? That they don't know anything more than what they've been provided by their staffers, and their staffers don't have access, and therefore it's just an exercise in futility, like Project Blue Book. So that's my frustration. But setting that aside, it may not matter. It really may not matter. I think we need to go to the next phase, and we need to really just look at, is the government ready? Not are they going to tell us, but as we are as a society, are we going to be ready for the news, however it comes? And really quickly, I was in DC all last week with my school at Georgetown, because I'm working on my thesis on this very topic, and talking to people at Homeland Security, DOD, and kind of just getting a sense of like, what type of plans might we have for some sort of event like this? And I think it's probably what you expect. People really do not deal with this until it's on their doorstep. And like Alejandro said, unless there's motivation, we get more explosive reports and in your face. We may not get the government to disclose or be more competent in this. It's probably going to come from something out of our control, and then we'll be forced to deal with it. So anyways, that's kind of my take on it, but keep trucking along. It's all positive in a sense that people are talking about it, and that's where we go.
Very good. Well said. Thank you. And thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ryan, Chrissy, Lee, and Alejandro. And thank you for everyone out there. Thank you for joining. This has been Talking Strange. Don't forget to subscribe and download each week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also check out the video versions of this on youtube.com/denofgeekus. And you can check us out on Talk Strange Pod on Twitter. Me personally, I am Aaron Sagers. You can give me a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on Patreon, all at Aaron Sagers. Until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.